People ask us some version of this question all the time. Where to get started with Theory Underground? There's so much content. Where can I find the best introduction to everything going on at Theory Underground? What's the overall vision? How do the courses fit together? Who are the main players in the organic network? And why is Dave doing it the way he is? Blah, blah, blah.
Well, you won't find a better introduction to Theory Underground than the recording you are listening to right now.
What you're about to hear is from the event we did in Berlin on May 10th, 2024. This is a part of the Theory Underground American Idiots European Tour. It was a singular event for so many reasons, chief among these being the interviewee himself, Ivar's candor, comportment, and commitment to the task of making TU, Timenergy, and this project intelligible to a general audience really brought it together.
At the same time, the space itself was amazing. We were so honored to be hosted by the Psychoanalytic Library and Thomas, its representative, who showed us hospitality that went above and beyond. On the secret playlist the Tier 1 and up subscribers at Theory Underground get access to. This video will now be the first in the series because one of my subscribers said he worked through that whole playlist, which is like about the essential lectures at Theory Underground, with his partner, but she said there needs to be something more succinct. This one goes out to you too. Enjoy.
Yeah, so I'll be moderating today. I preface the questions and everything thinking about that the members from this library will come. They are practicing psychoanalysts, and then it would be like the clash of the American digital theory perspective with the practicing German institutionalized perspective, and that was kind of the point. But now, as I see that most of you are here primarily because of them, and there won't be this clash, I will change the questions up, and I think the atmosphere will be a lot more relaxed. Not, I don't know how to say it. I hope that most of the discussion will come from the interaction of you and them, so feel free to ask them questions. I don't know if I will be needing to moderate it, so just raise your hand and then he can answer it. I will ask some questions, and then when accordingly ask your questions, so you don't need to wait for the end. It's much more of a discussion-based event than like a lecture or something. So yeah, we can just start by asking what is Theory Underground, how it came about, some facts, biographical facts about you, and yeah.
Cool. Well, first of all, thank you everybody. I know it's not like a lecture or something, but I still feel the need to say a couple of like opening things. Like, I do feel some kind of honor being here. You know, it really means a lot that you were able to put this together, the two of you. So thank you, Thomas and Ivar. Because on the way that we've been doing this tour, as well as the one that was in the United States in September of last year, we basically say, we're coming to a city near you. That's the subtitle of this anthology, Coming to a City Near You. And that's kind of only on the condition of people really being hospitable and making it possible. Outside of like one event on the last tour, where we had to spend a lot of money to try to get the venue in Midtown Manhattan, New York, to try to do this thing. Outside of that event, it's all been people just like opening up spaces. And they're always like these spaces that we didn't know existed. Like we wouldn't have known that a space this cool exists. And so it's really neat to know that this is happening. And so, yeah, so thank you. So Theory Underground, it plays off of several different ideas, and I will talk about like the signifier itself in a moment. But the main thing is that it's my vehicle to educate myself and to share my educational journey with other people, mostly who are high school dropouts or post-grad burnouts. And I usually say it's like American high school dropouts and European post-grad burnouts. And it really is like that, you know. And the Europeans who listen...
What if you're a twofer?
You can be both, yeah. That's me. I am both of those things. Except I'm not the European, but my education is in European post-grad kind of shit, you know, with the continental philosophy. And so, you know, I got my associate's degree a little late. I went to college when I was 23, and I studied philosophy and psychology, and then I went to Boise State for my the rest of my undergrad, for the bachelor's, and then for my master's as well. And the master's, I wasn't going to do it at a state university. I wanted to do it somewhere, you know, somewhere that would, because I had my eye on like a couple of universities for like, oh, you know, maybe I'll do my master's or a doctorate there. But the emphases of my research, like what I wanted to study, was not, there's not a program for it. And, you know, you talk about this clash of the old school and the internet age, and I'm very much a product of the internet age. And being in the theory scene on the internet at the same time that I was studying at college, I was experimenting, doing stuff online, doing events like this, you know, with the philosophy club at North Idaho College and Boise State University, where I was usually the president of these clubs, you know. Not always, but like I founded one of the clubs, and then I came in like a year later as president at the Boise State University one. And that was like the on-campus kind of philosophy discussion-based events that I was organizing, or I would bring speakers, you know. But I was also doing a lot of off-campus organizing, and you know, that was less like with the high school dropouts and European burnouts, because it was less established online, and it was more just like local people, what they're interested in. And so Theory Underground is maybe the fifth iteration of me trying to do something between the university and the public, something that's between the internet and a local space. And you know, so I've been kind of experimenting with the medium itself, right? And what is the medium? I mean, there's video, there's podcasts, but ultimately, like, the medium is the internet. And so there's the theory scene on the internet, and then there's the theory scene in academia. And in academia in the United States, theory is mostly studied by people who are doing literary criticism or film analysis. And that's why Žižek is so big in the States, is because that's the only place that people really do theory. Right? Philosophy is mostly analytic philosophy, the history of philosophy, or pragmatism. And so when I was looking for a place to study the things that I want to study, I wasn't finding the stuff that I wanted, which is, on the one side, I already had like this fidelity to kind of reading Marx and Heidegger inside out and critiquing them. But like in this kind of more German tradition of critique, you know, like immanent critique, meaning you read them, you get inside their work, and you try to really understand it. You're not just coming along being like, oh, I think they're wrong, I think they're wrong, I think they're wrong. And so we'll come back to that with the question of Timenergy and everything like that. I'll explain kind of like how that comes from reading Heidegger versus Marx in a way. But then I think the most important piece to this puzzle would probably just be a couple of people that I haven't mentioned yet. And so the first one is Michael Downs. He is the author of the Dangerous Maybe blog. And he and I have been friends now for almost 10 years, constantly motivating each other to put our work out there. And so Theory Underground was kind of this idea of it's my teaching platform, but I built it in such a way so that I can bring on guest lecturers. And the idea is like it's also Mikey's vehicle for his teaching as well. And so he's taught a course on Lacan, a course on Žižek, a course on Nick Land, and now he's about to teach another course on Žižek in September. And so Mikey's like a really important part of that picture. Then there's my wife, Anne Snellgrove McKerracher, who sadly couldn't be here. Thomas was asking about her outside because she is part of the tour, but she joins us in Krakow. And then she'll be with us through till the end in Oxford. And then, and she's absolutely essential to everything going on. And I think maybe towards the beginning she was less so. She was more kind of just like, oh, you're doing it, and maybe I'll sometimes do stuff. And so the first course was the idea of the university, Karl Jasper's. And the reason we did the idea of the university as the establishing course at Theory Underground is because we don't hate the university. We're not against academia. The reason we're doing this stuff sort of between academia and the public is because right now we don't see a viable path forward in academia to be able to research and teach the things that we want to be able to research and teach. But right now I'm actually preparing to teach Sociology 101 at Boise State. So it's like I do have like some kind of a foothold in the university system, but I've been mostly like working at Amazon while getting Theory Underground established. And we had to live in Mexico for 5 months just so that we could cut costs and I could focus on Theory Underground, because otherwise I would have had to work full time during that time, and there's no way I could have built it. And then the last person who I think is really important to mention at this point, there's also Brian Weeks, and he was also he's been with me through a lot of the different iterations of my experiments with teaching outside of the university, and so he was one of the co-instructors for the idea of the university. And then the last person is Nance, who is sort of like our representative student at Theory Underground. I always tell people, just be like Nance. Like, if you don't know how to act, just act like Nance, because like he's not just being himself. He is performing the role of someone who's saying, you know what, I've read a lot of books, but I never really read a book. You know, and that's the kind of spirit he brings to things, is like this intensity in reading. And I guess I'll throw out a shout out here to Rudy, because he is a Theory Underground subscriber, someone who's been very active in the last several months, and so he's also making things possible. But Theory Underground is basically myself, a handful of fellow travelers, and then some subscribers, students, and patrons. And they all are making it so that I don't have to work at Amazon. And I can just kind of do this full time. And so I always just say that it is a teaching and publishing platform.
Okay. I will have to come up with questions a bit on the spot, because it was differently prefaced. I thought about it differently. But yeah, just to talk about that a bit more, I don't know, I also find myself kind of in the same spot where I would like to think and read about a lot of things, and the university also kind of isn't, I think, up to the task. I don't know, it is as if there's a whole generation of young people who got exposed to theory and all of these concepts and videos through the internet, through YouTube. So 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you were never hear about Heidegger or Kierkegaard when you're 15. Like, maybe if your teacher would tell you about it, but then she or he would guide you toward a certain university. There was always this top-down pipeline, how knowledge was transmitted. And today, a lot of my friends, me, and I had NGO in Croatia, which kind of did a similar thing. It was more maybe based on topics just in the world, so not lecturing about, Heidegger, but it was more like applying certain topics of philosophers and thinkers to the broader world. I don't know. But yeah, I really see this opening up where a lot of young people got exposed to all these different theories, topics, and everything. But the internet often doesn't lead you to the end. So it opens the desire somehow for a concept and something, but it kind of still doesn't have the infrastructure to accommodate that knowledge gathering till the end. And then you are left up to the university, and that might be good in some cases, but I think not to say that that's an European answer, but like I, as somebody living in Croatia, then coming here to Germany, I had avenues of gaining that knowledge, but a lot of people don't. And I think that there on the internet, there's a big potentiality for actually something liberating, maybe even in the pure like economic sense, that a lot of people don't have the money, the time, or also I think also in Croatia there's a lot of guilt associated with going to humanities. How are you gonna work with that? How are you gonna get?
It's huge.
How are you gonna get money with that? And it's not even that. I mean, I think maybe the most not liberating, but the most interesting type of person is somebody who, I don't know, does engineering or IT and then loves to read about these things in his free time. So that it's kind of maybe even moving away from this I studied 5 years of philosophy or I studied 5 years of engineering. It's maybe more of a kind that you can expose yourself to more different things. Yeah, that's not really a question, but maybe a conversation starter. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that was my pathway, and not the from Croatia. My path in was what you're saying is like people who don't have the time, also who would have this huge guilt if they were to say get into the humanities. I was working probably at the age of 21 at a grocery store, working graveyard shift, stocking shelves. And my friend and we both started listening to podcasts, and then we started listening to audiobooks. And I didn't really ever do nonfiction before that, not really at all. And so here I was like listening to it. You know, it's mostly just the kind of the books that people in the United States get started with, and like this, we're you know, it's not very good. Like we're talking about like the power of positive thinking and Think and Grow Rich and you know, The Secret, and these are kind of like these are the books that people start out with if they're getting into nonfiction. You know, it's like basically self-help and business success. And but I had like this hint that there was something, and I was looking for it, and the theory scene wasn't there yet, so I still didn't know what philosophy was at all. Like I didn't know who Socrates was. I didn't know who Plato was. It wasn't until my first semester at the university where I was like, oh, it's philosophy. That's what I've been looking for you know, a decade. But if it wasn't for the fact that I was working a job that's just like mundane, you know, just putting things on the shelf, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have started tuning in with my ears. And that's why I think both of these books are, well, no, it's especially this one. It says here at the very beginning, if I can turn to it.
I think Timenergy too.
No, I think that one's a little different because that one's like
A little longer.
to all the people who blah, blah, blah. Yeah, this one's just to the workers with earbuds trying to reclaim their minds from work. Yeah, and that's why I care so much about the public content, like making sure that there's good, freely available content for people to go deeper with. But that's the thing. That's why what we do, though, isn't like a 20-minute video essay or, you know, there's a lot of people who are doing very good work popularizing philosophy, theory, psychoanalysis online with short, very, very like they choose every word they say, like to try to make sure that the video has, like it's not long, right? Like they're trying to stay short, and they're trying to like they're trying to basically satisfy the algorithm to reach the most people. And so the idea with the stuff that we're putting on the free side is that it's all the deep end. What's an example of the deep end?
Like 12-hour readings of Richard Boland's Heidegger and Ruins, 2 days in a row. Like
So 24 hours, yeah.
10-hour reading of Descartes, marathon readings of Marx, like 7 to 12-hour long streams on YouTube. That I think we both always try to keep in mind our former selves as workers, where like I was like voraciously consuming audio content as a truck driver and a toilet cleaner and a deliverer. 20-minute videos suck because you have to put all your shit down, clean your hands off, get to your phone. But if you're working and your body is occupied and you see a 6-hour video, you're like, that's the first half of my day. Yeah.
Like when I was working at Amazon, I'd be like I would record an MP3. I put a PDF into a robot reader. It reads it, and then I record that while I'm sleeping. And then I'd get up for work. I'd have the MP3, and sometimes it takes several days to record it. With like Foucault, like some of these books, like, oh my God, that's so big. But then I'm like, yeah, this will get me through a week. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Just how can I imagine reading 12 hours? You're reading, or you're reading aloud and then you're discussing, or how are you doing this?
Yeah, we try to keep it 70-30 or 73-27, or whatever.
73% of the time we're reading.
Yeah.
27%
of the time we're interjecting, and we try to go into exegesis, but we often fail, and we do get sidetracked, and we do. By the end of the stream, it kind of devolves into fun, but that's okay. If a 12-hour stream, if the last 45 minutes is us stuttering and giggling, I think it's okay.
He's exaggerating.
Yeah.
We finish it off with a slam dunk.
Yeah, we do close them up pretty strong. So.
No, it's the end of the epic marathon streams where it gets goofiest.
Yeah.
But that's because like those days I wake up at 4 a.m. And then I'm setting up, and then I get something going at 5 a.m. and then it goes until 7 a.m. This is all my time. And so the reason I'm doing those times though is so that Europeans are going to start seeing that stuff way early in the day, and then by the time American workers are showing up at work, they can go back to the beginning and then go 1.5 speed to catch up. and they do a handful do. And I kind of like the idea with like trying to satisfy the algorithm is you assume the lowest common denominator, the attention span that needs something to hook them every 3 minutes, but you're also going to have little spicy things within those 3 minutes. So like every 30 seconds, you're trying to keep the attention. But it's like, I assume an obsessive who's already invested. And so I'm talking like, I assume like the person that's not assumed by almost anyone on YouTube. And then I always say like, oh, if this video gets 500 views or 1,000 views, probably 1 out of 50 people is actually going to watch it all the way through. And then like 1 out of 500 is going to watch it again 6 months later. But the person who watches it again 6 months later, like that person is going to get so much more from it. Because we're not just, like exegesis is an interesting, idea. It's an art form. And obviously in the scholastic days, like there was a whole process to exegesis. But here we are on the internet. And so like the goal is almost all the time that at least one of us has read it before. So this isn't just reading it on the first pass. I don't tend to like the ones where we're doing it for the first pass. Like we tried to do that with Lumen, but I just was like, I can't do that, man.
Yeah.
Like, so, it's like Lumen is like a real, social theorist. I should give him a first pass before I'm on the internet talking about him. And so I'm trying to come back to a text on the second or third reading with this public exegesis thing. And then usually there's like 2 levels to it. On the one side, it's like we're trying to bring people in on it. If it feels intimidating or if it feels too much, there's a little bit of a meta conversation about like, hey, let it wash over you. If you're getting left behind, remember, there's no exam. Mm-hmm. Like, let go of all those concerns. It's okay. Your unconscious will retain more than you realize as long as you're trying. And then on the other side, it's like our own meta-analysis about like, what are we getting from it this time that we didn't get from it before? And then trying to like hystericize our own readings of the text. Like if we read something and we're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Then I'm like, but does it? Like, are we just reading it wrong? So like, there's always this question of hermeneutics, so, but like, yeah, we do like the last one we did this 2 days before we left for the tour. It was a 17-hour stream.
Oh yeah, that was rough.
It was a 17-hour stream, and for these epic marathon streams where I start at 4 a.m. and then I go until 7 a.m. I say I, but Nancy's there the whole time, so it's us. And then we usually have a new guest every hour to hour and a half, and I have like a pre-recorded sort of commercial break that's usually a plug for a course or just explaining what Theory Underground is that I play between the guests. And so that gives me a chance to run to the restroom, blah, 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 get refreshed. But this is like my favorite thing because I don't think anyone else on the internet is doing this in the world of theory. These are not randomly selected guests. Like these guests are usually, I'm inviting them because I'm interested in their work. I've read their work. And somehow, if I haven't read them, I've at least seen some of their stuff. Or maybe I've got people in my audience who are like, you keep talking about this thing, you've got to talk to this person. And so then bringing on different people to talk about somewhat related threads. And so like I opened up the question of the relationship between philosophy and theology and where does psychoanalysis fit in there. And then I brought on Adrian Johnston, hardcore materialist, psychoanalyst, atheist. But I also brought on Dwayne Roussel. He's a Muslim now. He converted to Islam. And then I also had Todd McGowan on. He's an atheist, Lacanian. But just bringing, and then I had Samuel and Daniel, and one of them is a religious atheist, whereas the other one is, and that's not the same as a Christian atheist. So many terms, And then the other one is just a Christian, but not a standard kind of Christian guy. Like there's no one like Daniel Garner. And so anyway, like that day was wild, but like we're talking through the whole thing, and we'll bring back in something someone else said. And so it's not like, and then I re-release those videos later as standalone episodes for people who can only do an hour at a time, So, yeah. This is an example of playing with the medium, though, and seeing if we can't push it in some... Like what?
Or even break it.
Yeah.
Break ourselves out of the tendency to just, like, chase the algorithm, tail the algorithm, if you will, but... yeah, everything is very experimental, but very thought. Like there's a lot of thought. There's a lot of congealed thought that goes into everything. And especially with the marathon streams where we have different guests, where the meta narrative kind of appears, I think that's really special. Yeah.
Something always comes out of it that we didn't expect, Yeah.
Okay, and where does psychoanalysis come in to play? So what's your relation to psychoanalysis? And yeah.
So that's like the big question, that's the huge question. So I think psychoanalysis was first interesting to me in Psychology 101 when the professor who was really good at teaching this stuff clearly did not give Freud the credit that he deserves. I mean, he did say, like, father of the field, very important, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, he thinks that you want to fuck your mom and kill your dad. And we don't need to stay with that. And afterwards, I was like, yeah, but that stuff about the ego and the superego and the id, that's fascinating. I'm really interested in this. And he's like, yeah, it's really cool, huh? And then I'm like, yeah. So like, what should I start reading of his? And he goes, oh, don't read him. Don't read Freud. Now I'm finally getting around to reading Freud all this time later because the course that Leon Brenner just taught on the clinical structures, we're reading his negation and a bunch of other of his, I can't think of anything.
Foreclosure. Verstellen, some German word, I don't know.
Vorstellung.
There we go.
Rudy was in that
He's
class.
our German guy.
Yeah. Yeah, he was helping Leon with the German
translate.
sometimes. Yeah. Is this making the noise? Okay, all right. It's okay. So, psychoanalysis though. So, I'm think fundamentally interested in the question of the good life. And I think that the psychoanalysts also are. They're trying to help people who are going through something. And the concepts that come out of the clinic are meant to in some way work with human beings who are going through things. And so there is this interesting relationship between philosophy and psychoanalysis, because a lot of philosophy is asking the question about the good life. And to really give that question any kind of real traction, you have to have a theory of the subject. And analysts have learned things over the centuries when dealing with their analysans. And so I think, for instance, like Lacan makes a really valuable contribution to thinking about human subjectivity. And of course, Mikey would argue that Lacan has the most sophisticated theory of the subject of any thinker who's ever lived. And that's a really big statement that I don't feel the ability to back up, but I trust Mikey. And you could say that the transference here has been established with Mikey.
Mikey is?
He is.
Michael Downs.
He's in this book.
Yeah.
He's the one I was saying is the author of the Dangerous Maybe blog. And he
forthcoming.
a forthcoming book that is a critique of Nick Land, who's sort of like the dark Žižek, a Deleuzian, accelerationist Deleuzian, right-winger guy, But it's not just a critique, like it's also like a very serious engagement, because Land, as opposed to Žižek, thinks a lot more about the future. And so in the world of philosophy, philosophers don't ever have like some elaborate system for thinking about the future. Like it's like Nostradamus. That's not philosophy, right? Like what, prophecy? Like what are we talking about? But the CCRU, the Cybernetic Culture Research Unit, is sort of the milieu or school of thought that kind of came up around Nick Land at
Warwick College, with Mark Fisher and Robin McKay and all those fancy internet
Sadie
people.
Plants.
Sadie Plant's amazing. Yeah.
Anna Greenspan. Yeah, and so this is all just an aside of me explaining who Mikey is. What's the point? So I'm just saying that I trust Mikey on Land. On
Lacan.
Well, actually, I trust him on Land as well. A nice slip. But the fact is I think that it's like if you have a professor figure in your life who can make anything that's really difficult seem easier, because you're kind of just like, maybe that transference is there and maybe they just have like a skill with cracking difficult texts, go with it. Like I just always tell people, go with it. Who cares if they're teaching, like let's just say you're not interested in Whitehead. I don't care. If that person in your life is teaching Whitehead, then you should be studying Whitehead, because what you're going to gain from the experience goes far beyond the subject matter itself and goes into your actual capacities as a learner, your comprehension. So there's that. But the way that psychoanalysis became most significant to a theory of time energy for me, and this is why I got most interested in it, was because of these conversations where basically Mikey was always talking, oh, Lacan this, oh, Lacan that. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Why are you saying it? Well, why do you say that? Why do you say that? So I'd hystericize him. And eventually got to a point where I was like, pretty much sold. I was like, this is fascinating stuff. I was like, why don't you teach me this on my channel? And so then he actually planned out a bunch of lectures and taught me Lacan on my own channel. And I was modeling the student back in 2020 when I was going through some subjective destitution, right? I was realizing everything I was doing was bullshit and I needed to change. I didn't exactly know how I was going to change what I was doing. And a lot of these reasons were political, right? The political climate, the things that were happening, I was very disillusioned. And so what do? Start studying Lacan, and then through that, he starts bringing in Žižek, because Žižek would be then the connection, obviously, between the clinic and the broader society. And then this whole question about like the applicability of psychoanalytic clinical concepts being brought into the broader society, applied on cultural things, is a big question for us. Maybe we'll get into it a little bit, because that was going to be a lot more of the theme here. But I think that's kind of over here. Let me just kind of put it on the side for now, and I'll just say, for me, it all comes down to death drive. Right? And like the way I understand it is like Freud's whole project kind of comes to this point where then he writes Beyond the Pleasure Principle, and it's like this big revelation, and it's through Lacan that gets like an upgrade for the 20th century, right? An upgrade that we could say is post-Marxist, post-Heideggerian, right? And that for me, it's like I'm coming from Marx and Heidegger, and the nice thing about Lacan is that he knows enough about those things. He knows it, so he's not going to have some stupid theory of the subject. Like I would think his psychoanalytic subject wouldn't have been as good had he not been through the fundamental critique of subjectivity that Heidegger does, especially in his early work. And it's in the aftermath of that Lacan returns to the subject, but now this is a subject constituted by lack, right? And so it's not like this. It's not a substantive subject in the way that, like, say, Descartes' working with. But my whole thing is like time energy is bringing together time and energy and trying to think like what are the connections between time and energy existentially for human beings trying to live in the world. And philosophers are good on time, but usually when they start, who's thinking about energy? And I think nobody's thinking about energy as much as psychoanalysts. I think that they've probably put more rigor and thought into human energy, and that's what libidinal economy is all about. So that's why psychoanalysis matters.
Okay.
It really is this chair.
Yeah. You can just go to time energy then. It's not like I have these contrived big questions linking those two together. Yeah. How does then time energy fit into Lacan?
What is energy first, and then what is time energy?
Yeah, and so
because you said Asian philosophy is very, very interested in some idea of energy. This notion of chi, for instance, is very important, and you could translate it with energy. It's maybe not the best idea, but it's a part of it. Translated with energy.
Yeah, I think that Qi is really interesting, and I've got the I Ching, and I've been trying to look into that because Anna Greenspan said that it's ultimately about different qualities of time, and I was like, qualities of time? Is that time energy? I'm like thinking about it, I mean, I'm doing that on my own. I hope I will find someone who really knows their stuff and is able to kind of crack Qi for me, like help me along on that way. It's not going to be Mikey, Yeah. But I'll start with time. And so where Marx and Heidegger were formative for me is the politics of time. And so like Heidegger doesn't politicize time. And he, in fact, is often confused as being like completely apolitical, And then people are like, oh, the Nazi thing. It was like this weird, naive moment. And it's like, it wasn't naive and it wasn't a weird moment. It was like he was a radical conservative, you could probably say proto-fascist, through the entirety of the 1920s leading up to Being in Time. Now, if I'd known that before I ever read Being in Time, I don't know that I would have. You know what I mean? But I had a professor who was like, oh, no, that's irrelevant. He's just naive later on, but this is where it's at. And so thankfully I was duped and I got into it because what Heidegger does do with existential time is really important. So we'll talk about existential time in a second. But with Marx, I read Marx through his 1844 manuscripts, which is problematic. It's problematic because is it this chair is making all that noise? Can I swap this thing out with something else? It's crazy.
Yeah, we can swap it.
No, it's fine.
This one?
Is it really this chair?
Yeah, it is.
It's kind of rickety, I guess. Here. There's other chairs over there. Maybe. Yeah, I'll trade you. Because it sounds like it's going the whole time. Thank you. Okay, so I read Marx through A Strange Labor, which is one of the manuscripts from 1844. And I don't know, show of hands, who's familiar with estranged labor, fragment on estranged labor? Nobody, perfect, except for Rudy and Nance. Normally, when you think about Marx, you're thinking about the Communist Manifesto. You're thinking about class warfare. The history. History is the history of class conflict. Workers of the world unite, and that's pretty much it. And I think it was like the New Left kind of discovered the 1844 manuscripts. Like these hadn't really been published. These were not. These were just something that he had written before getting to his mature, critique of political economy. But I didn't really know all of that stuff early on. I just was reading his entire project through estranged labor because very early, maybe third semester at college, a professor didn't treat Marx fairly, and I was like, wonder what's going on there. And so I started looking into things, and I found a professor, and I was like, hey, could you teach the philosophy club some Marx, because we're not getting the whole story here. And this was the guy who also was really into Heidegger and told me oh no, he's great. Well, he had us read Estranged Labor first, and because I come from a pretty dysfunctional home in a pretty poor part of the country that's very working class and all of that, I really resonated with this, because ultimately what it's about is when a person is spending their whole life making cars that they'll never get to own, right? You spend your whole life making cars that you won't get to own. And the only way you could is to go into so much debt that by the time you're done paying it off, you could have probably bought two of them, right? But the point is the Mexican workers at the Nissan factory in Aguascalientes, Mexico, they're not making enough to own those cars, right? Well, that's what Marx is getting at with the idea of alienated labor or estranged labor. And the point is that most of the system is people producing things that they have no control over, and that they, even if they could own it, let's just say the person at the pen factory is able to own some pens because pens are cheaper. They're putting more value into the process than they're getting back from it. And the key to what they're separated from in this sense of alienation is their species being and their any ownership over the process, and the ability to be really part of a culture. And so species being is often misunderstood as being we have an essential nature as the human animal, and we're being separated from that essential nature. And people would think about this in some kind of evolutionary terms. But what is Marx as a sort of post-Hegelian? He's thinking about this as we're virtually purposive creatures, which means that what our species being is not just about our bodies, but it's also we're extended in the world. We're part of our environment, and we can't just be in it. We actually have to theorize it. We have to understand it. We have to interpret it. And humans who get to understand the environment that they live in, and which would be mythology, which would be art, which would be science, or proto forms of science, folk science, whatever. That's essential to all of us being on the same page, so to speak. We're all kind of in this process of understanding the world. And he calls that spiritual nourishment. And so that's crucial to me. It's because I felt I understand that, because I don't understand anything about the world that I live in. And I don't feel like anyone that I know has ever felt like they really have any control over anything outside of maybe how they consume when they're off of work. But obviously, if a third of our life is spent sleeping, the other third of our life is spent working. So what's the other third of our life? The other third of our life is spent recuperating from work. And Adorno points out that what we call recreational activities, it's recreating. It's recreating what? Labor power, so you can go back to work. And so I was thinking about that way. Is so that's ultimately my problem with the system that I've always kind of taken for granted, is that it makes it so that people don't get to have relationships with one another, right? Like, so, I mean, just reading that alone was enough for me to go like, oh, like we're all coming from broken homes because our parents are working too much. Well, it was then through, seeing the world that way and then going through Heidegger that, you get into existential time. And it's like existential time, as opposed to the time of physics, is when you say, oh, like how far to the bus stop? And then the person says, oh, it's like 2 cigarettes. Like, you kind of have a sense for what that means. Or, I don't know, there's probably other examples that could come to mind for how we think about time, but we experience it very differently than it all just being like this one unified block that's infinite and linear, and every minute and every day and every week and every month, it's all basically the same, right? Humans have tended, and I think I could almost be completely transhistorical and sweeping in my grand statement and say, humans have always lived in cyclical time. And now we live in linear time. Yeah, there's still seasons. Yeah, there's still Christmas. And there's still certain things that give you a sense of like, there's a cycle there. For now, yeah. For now? Yeah, for now. But that's the thing is like, if you've ever worked on Christmas Day, then Yeah. That's pretty, So the church bells, maybe they still go off from time to time, but they don't control the time of our lives. And going back to these grand sweeping statements about humans throughout all societies, the idea of the fixed hour is a modern invention. The fixed hour, where every hour is 60 minutes. The lunch hour used to be longer than the hour before it and the hour after it. And so variable hours is just like, that's the basic building block of your day. But that kind of idea about variability in time expands out, so that there would be times of the year when you're working really hard, times of the year when you're not working as hard. So existential time then also should be really important for thinking about children going through puberty and parents who are now getting so old. So for instance, this is our event at Oxford, the last one of this tour. Is going to get into this. It'll be kind of the theme of the whole event, the consciousness of time energy. Well, as a perfect example of not all time is created equal, from the age of 70 to the age of 75, every year you basically live 5 years in that year because you're aging so rapidly in that span of time. Which means that if you want to be there for your parents, you need to be there for them more in their 60s than in their 50s, more in their 70s than in their 60s, more, right? And especially in the crucial time from 70 to 75. Like, you'll want to be there a lot more. And I would say the same thing is probably true with children going through puberty. You can't treat a 12-year-old like a 7-year-old, right? Because a 7-year-old, they're basically the same. You keep coming home, like there's always something new, but they're basically the same. Whereas when they're like 12, 13, 14, like this is a crucial time to be there in their life. Well, capitalism doesn't recognize that. Capitalism doesn't respect that. Capitalism doesn't care. Capitalism says, get back to work. Like, you've got bigger things to worry about. You've got to worry about your retirement. Oh, you want to have a relationship with your kid or actually make sure they can get into college? Get back to work. And so that's where then I would bring in the political element of reading Existential Time. But existential time in its proper, most systematic development is being in time. Like, I don't think it could really be achieved without being in time. And what Heidegger does in that is he develops the structures of being in the world, which are givens, right? And so he's debunking, this sort of Cartesian hyperbolic doubt that just kind of clears the table of all of the assumptions and says, let's just start with the thing that we know for sure and then build up one thing after another on top of that. And Heidegger goes, yeah, but if you sweep away all the givens and then you build your little, castle, you're not gonna be able to bring back a lot of those givens. And some of those givens are essential existential structures of our being in the world. And existential time is one of those essential existential structures of our being in the world, right? Descartes doesn't think about that. Of course, if you read his discourse on method, he lives in a world. It has worldhood. He's telling you about his life and how he grew up and all of these things and like how his theory comes out of his development. But in the meditations, though, of course, he just kind of clears that all out and like, that doesn't matter. We're going to do something totally scientific. And so that very constrained approach that just focuses on absolute certainty and uses hyperbolic doubt to clear everything else out, it clears out existential time. And it clears out all these other existentials, like, for instance, the fact that you care. Like, at the fundamental level, you care, and not just in the sense of like, oh, I care about the things in this room, or I care about this other person. No, you care about your life in light of the past, thinking about the future. You are temporal and modal, right? To say you're temporal is to say that we are creatures of time, but also like to say that we're modal means, well, how you interpret your past and how you project on the horizon of possibilities on the future, that changes everything, right? And so it's thinking that way then that you can say, well, without this breakdown of families, without this breakdown of communities, people's horizon of possibilities might include things like developing their talents, discovering their talents in the first place, and then maybe developing on those talents. But of course, if the whole horizon of possibility is constrained by a schooling system that only cares about, ultimately, whether you are a deserving professional or manager or an undeserving, entry-level worker, then everything's going to, revolve around the exam. Everything's going to revolve around whether you show up on time for things. And it's going to be a lot more about this what they call in critical pedagogy, the invisible syllabus. It's more about that than it is actually about the subject matter. And the subject matters that you're taught in school come about not from a vacuum, but from people who had leisure time, right? They had skole, is the Greek word for it, right? Which it's not just like leisure, like you're hanging out at the beach. This is the leisure of active leisure. Adorno, when he's talking about it in his free time essay, he says, I don't have hobbies. He listens to music actively. And then he goes and plays on the piano, right? Like, he doesn't have hobbies. He's actively involved in these things that are a part of his world. It's not because he doesn't have to recreate his labor power. This recreation thing is not a problem for him because he has, relatively speaking, his time energy. And so the idea of time energy then is just to say, when I'm reading Heidegger, I was like, well, this existential time thing is cool, but what about the fact that I have time sometimes to do things? Like, I have time, so I think, I should be able to learn a language right now. Or I have time, so I should be able to practice a musical instrument right now. I have time, so I should be able to read books. But I have this time without energy. Time without energy sucks. It's garbage time. That's what I call it, right? Time without energy is garbage time. It's exhausted. And that's time that you need to spend doom scrolling on your phone, laying on the couch, maybe watching Netflix, whatever. But these are recuperative kinds of activities, not the kinds of activities where you can seriously, in a prolonged fashion, focus on something like cultivating your higher human capacities. And so thinking about that and like these arguments from people, people, if they had more time, all they would do is play video games. All they do is watch pornography and jack off. Like, people have like these sort of responses to any talk of the politics of time. And I think that there's something to that because they're going off of how humans are today. How humans are when habituated to a society and through a schooling system where you're not taught to do things for their own sake, which is what being an aristocrat or a gentleman was always about, right? Going all the way back to Aristotle. It's about excellence. It's about a kind of happiness that is not this fleeting happiness, but that comes from sacrifice and effort. And so time energy is like, the way I define it now is that it is large, energy-infused, repeatable blocks of reliable time between us. only started quilting it with Between Us in like the last like week and a half, and I don't think I even said it in Brussels. But it's like so important because I think people think that I'm talking like we're all like these batteries, like we each carry around some time energy, and then it goes into the work process, and then you don't have any more, and then you have to go recharge, and it's like no, that's not what we're talking about. It's between us, right? Because desire is desire of the other. If you have freed up your time, but everyone else is uninspired. And even if you were to master the violin, they wouldn't be able to tell. They'd be like, "Oh, it's really good," But like they don't know music theory. They don't listen to this kind of music, and so, there's like so much effort you could put into something, and they're not going to be able to recognize what you're doing. There's not even like the possibility of them misrecognizing you in a meaningful way, and so that's what time energy is supposed to help people realize, is that when you have this free time in the evening or this free time on the weekend, and you're like, oh, maybe I should do something, and you're punishing yourself, you feel guilty because you're not doing things during that time. Well, you don't have time energy though. You have time, but it's not reliably repeatable. And even if you have energy in that moment, the fact that that moment is not reliably repeatable means you can't really harness it towards the violin or reading being in time or something like that.
Okay. And then Žižek often likes to say, yeah, okay, you like to do revolutions or protests, but what's the day after? Okay, now we know time energy and everything, but what would be some concrete? I know that's not the point of it, it's just like a term to use to applied critique but what would be like, some concrete? How would, if you were a Michigan State or Idaho State politician, senator, I don't know, how would change look like politically, if you would try to model a society, a politics around time energy?
You're gonna really make me a senator. I can't be like the God Emperor. If I could be like the God Emperor, I got this covered. Trust me, But no, if it's like the senator, it's like, oh my God.
Speaker of the House is the best I can do.
I'll take it.
Yeah. All right. We'll work with you for now. Yeah. At the most basic reformist level, I think that paid maternity leave for both parents, and that being 18 months, is a huge step in the right direction, that some European countries do this.
Can I
yes, please.
I'm from Texas.
Yeah.
I moved to Europe when I was like 22, 23, I'm 42 now.
Holy shit.
And I'm a Swedish permanent resident. And we have to debunk this really badly. Sweden is kind of like this la-la land sort of democracy. They had 70 years of single party rule, so the workers could have all the things you're fantasizing about, only to vote right. So that's really a problem if we put in all of our political economy to kind of do the Star Wars version, and we get Bernie Sanders in power for 70 years, only to kind of wake up in Inception and realize that's not going to do.
I agree.
Most of them.
Yeah, but you can just see it like nothing went wrong. It's just like working class people became so bourgeois they could turn right wing.
Yeah.
So they had a worker paradise. The worker paradise.
That's my dream, man. That's what I want. That's what I want. No.
Everybody universalized.
But as an American, I totally see. We have like Bernie Sanders come on TV. Everyone else is just like a debased troglodyte, and here you have someone who's like a sincere human being who put in like whatever kind of unfathomable amount of gumption and commitment, and is so compelling as a human being that we actually can't like just do basic empiricism and like where for whatever reason this kind of rat utopia ran. It just like ran itself into the ground for like no particular reason, and nobody has any backup plan. This is like the plan was like, okay, let's avoid 1917 style Holocaust. That's basically one of the stories that happened there that I learned from Sweden, is that the Nobels were Swedish, but they moved to Russia. And then they saw what happened in the Russian Revolution, barely escaped Azerbaijan with their life. And they got back to Sweden, and they got the industry and the royal family together and the worker parties, and like, look, it's not going to work for anybody. So they had this kind of almost like a steel and coal agreement between the aristocrats and the capitalists and the workers, being like, nobody wants that. And so they're like, hey, we won't kill you all if you give us like a union. And then the royal family is like, hey, if you won't kill us all, we'll give you a parliament. And they kind of made a kind of a sort of a thief's agreement to not do a Mexican standoff, which everyone just saw what happened.
Yeah.
Right. And so the Romanovs got shot, and then the communists had to do Red Terror, and they just saw that everything got blown up, and so there was kind of mutually assured destruction, and it's like across the street, so everyone, it's like not like a remote, it's not like some other like place in the world, and then that's what I keep hearing now, is that all anybody can do is to try to LARP social democracy yet one more time.
Yeah.
As the only game in town is terrifying.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like 3 steps ahead of me on where I was going here, which is great because like I was gonna end it in that, but without the personal experience that kind of gives it the I think some rubber meeting the road there, personally.
Like I'm from
your actual frustration
I'm
is
from
from
trailer park to free education.
Yeah.
And I thought I had a life raft there, and I realized that like no, it's another Dante's style ring of gaslighting and
It's
hopelessness.
a golden toilet bowl.
Yeah. Or actually, it's more like it's the hamster wheel with a little ketamine.
Yeah.
To help deal with the fact that like, hey, it's another cancer wheel, but this time we put ketamine in the water. So.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Well, and so this is every time I've ever said anything negative publicly about metamodernism, it's because this is their solution for everything. The new book that they put out is called The Nordic Ideology, and like they're basically saying like this social democracy thing, man, if we could all just listen to each other and work across the aisle towards a social democracy, that'd be it. And of course, like they're not looking at their situatedness in the global scheme of things, and like why it might be easier to do things there than it would be elsewhere, or where their wealth comes from, like the fact that so much of it is like caught up in like the global south, right? So like those kinds of things aren't on their radar. And then they're like, we just need to be metamodern because postmodernism did its thing, and now we just need to be constructivists instead of deconstructivists, which sounds great, except that they're not tarrying with the negative, to say that like a Hegelian, which would be, what are the contradictions of the 20th century that made it so that postmodernism had to do what it did? And they're not thinking that way. They're just thinking of it like literary critics, like, postmodernism is just something that you do in the classroom, and we need to get over that so we can do social democracy together. And it's like, that's cool, guys. Like, that's cool. And like most of the time, most of their newsletters that go out are just about yoga and mushrooms, right? Like most of it is not about, philosophy proper or, say critique of political economy. But that's where critique of political economy will take you. It's like, so the unsatisfactoriness of, say, the Norwegian, or the Nordic, ideology, or whatever it is that they're selling as the solution right now. Now, I mean, I'm put in this situation where I'm a senator and I have to like play with that, and it's like there's a reason why I don't want to be a senator, and that's because I don't think that these are going to be like long-term solutions. But I do want to say one thing, devil's advocacy here, because when something happens in the United States, it trickles out to the rest of the world. When Sweden goes and does its own thing on its own, they're surrounded by the rest of the world, right? And so if the United States, this is why I was on board with Bernie back in the day. It's like, yeah, if he had won, and if he'd actually been able to do anything, and if he was bringing along with him like some of this like non-identity politics based broad working class, consciousness, kind of like, hey, we're all in this together, like, let's go. Things could come from that. What it degenerated into, nothing good can come from that. And that was kind of why I was so burnt out in 2020, right? Was because, he drops out, COVID, Black Lives Matter, 7 months of writing. And it's like, cool, everyone's acting like this is a revolution. It ain't it. Everyone's acting like Chaz in Seattle, like this little, they're like 5-block radius, like, we've got a commune going now. Like, that was radical. And I'm like, okay, guys, we're back to Occupy. This is not a real way forward, And so it's depressing when you see people putting things forward like this is the solution, and you know that is not the solution.
I'm just more like, because it came from Timenergy, which I think is like what the topic is, and I'm just like kind of wondering what the Lenin-esque total tactical flexibility is of time energy.
What do you mean? So the what?
I said the Lenin-esque like total tactical flexibility of implementing like I don't know, like if the Soviet Union was somehow like worker centered or whatever. The labor value theory. What is there a labor value theory of time energy?
No, like there is a time energy theory of value, like we could talk about, but no, it's not the labor theory of value. We're very on board with the. Now this is gonna be like this is super fucking like in the weeds Marxist shit, but like because I don't want to have to explain what the labor theory of value is and then tell you about why I think the labor theory of value is either a misunderstanding of Marx or Marx was just confused. And it's one of those two things, and there's like big debates in the field, but like we go for this value form approach, which says that the issue is that everything is equal before the dollar sign. Everything, including your labor, including all things on this earth, and that like that's the bigger issue here, and that in capitalism, things being value having anything to do with the socially necessary labor time to produce something. That is a big part of the problem. Like it's such a big part of the problem that it means that we are all like rightly worried about something like automation. You know, it's putting people out of work. Well, it shouldn't be putting people out of work. It should be making it so that we can do cooler things. But instead, we're all struggling. You know, who was just talking about this yesterday? With the like the jobs. They're not getting dumber. Like they're not just getting dumber, but like more alienating almost. Where it's like the person standing at the like the self-checkout at the grocery store. I don't know if you all have like these self-checkout spots in the grocery stores. But like now instead of just being there, hello, hi, how are you? Scan, here's how much money it's going to cost. Instead of that, which is already kind of alienating because you have to play this role the whole day. Now you're standing there and you're not really interfacing with any of these people, but you're a cop. You're kind of watching to make sure no one's stealing stuff. And you hear the machine say, thank you. Oh, you didn't put your bag in the right spot. Oh, please put your card. And you're hearing the same things all day. Oh my God, it's worse now, right? Well, look, for me, it's so bringing it back to this grand Leninist. I'm not a Leninist, and I'm in this period of moratorium, is what I call it, right? I'm though there's no such thing as a non-political position. I try to assume it, and one of my operating assumptions is that everybody's wrong and that we haven't figured out like what needs to be done. And my friends who are like, but Lenin wrote the book, what must be done? They're probably more wrong than a neoliberal, like at this point. They're probably doing they do more to undermine any movement towards basic things than the people who are actively arguing against them, because here you're, it's like, hey, we're gonna knock on doors for Bernie, and they're like, yes, comrade. And they're like holding some the manifesto.
I think this Žižek provocation, it always kind of ends in that how hard it is, but the pancake gets thinner and thinner when it talks about like what if you were the God Emperor, like what would your policies actually be? And I'm always kind of curious for like why with the kind of intellectual firepower, which I can see concentrated pretty regularly in some kind of quorum, that this actual idea to get to like what the policy level is just like so intractable. And I think that's just, even if you just pass over like.
Well, it's because, do you want to start at the level of basic reformist social democracy, or do you want to get to the point where we are saying we've correctly diagnosed the current situation and we're trying to roll out our prescription or solution for the current situation? Because you can do basic reformist stuff, we'll get people their maternity leave or whatever. But at the point that or Medicare for all or something like that. But if we want to go bigger, the amount of firepower in this quorum ain't gonna cut it. But maybe some more of us, and for a little bit more sustained effort, maybe we could get there. But basically, I'm saying the kind of intellectual milieu that did give birth to the actual labor struggles, so the 18th and 19th centuries, we're talking the societies and salons and working class institutions, the schools, the libraries, these are all working class in the sense that they had to build them themselves. Without all of those things existing, no guy like Lenin could have come in. And of course, maybe he fucked it all up. Maybe he jumped the gun. He's kind of like one of these crazy Anabaptist dudes, you know, like he's just like, you know, he thinks that he's got the truth, you know, and like the Spirit shows him how to read the text or whatever. And it's like, I don't know, I realize that might be heretical or offensive to some of you, and I get it. But we're in a situation where we are assuming we don't understand the situation and we want to try to understand it. But just to close, I want to just really quickly close this out, and so it'll probably just like take a minute. But like I would just say, I would always say, yeah, anything that gives people, like families mostly, I'm going to focus on families, more time, relative time energy, because like real time energy would be like these large energy infused repeatable blocks of time between all of us that we could do something with. But like, okay, let's just be practical and realistic. Well, like parents and communities like having more time for their kids, especially at crucial ages. And then I would also say old folks in these kind of crucial stages, like people need to be treated like people instead of just objects. And that means like realizing, hey, you know, let's just say like you work at this corporation, they're like, oh yeah, your kid's going to be going through puberty, like, and then, okay, well then we'll make sure that you don't have to work like as much for like those months or like, you know, I guess years, right? Those kinds of things matter, like they have a real impact on people's lives. But at the level of like bigger changes, I think my biggest push is like institutions. New institutions need to be built. We do not have institutions built for the 21st century. We have hollowed out, you know, remains of institutions that had a place in an old world. And what we need now are new institutions. Like, and the two I advocate for, I don't put a lot of thought towards solutions. And I think that if I put anything on the table, well, then we could all sit there and it's not the thing that I think we should be doing. But to honor the question, two examples of institutions I think that would be really important would be transitional immigrant, refugee, transitional, almost like universities. But like the point would be, I think the right and the left could agree that you don't want to completely cut the flow of people coming into a country, and you also don't want to just completely remove any barriers at all, and that instead, like, you should have transitional institutions that are meant to equip people with not just the job skills, but also just the human, getting to be a human. In a lot of cases, they never got to be a family. Right? We're talking about people who have gone from one terrible situation to another, and now they're here. And instead of just like terrorizing them or telling them to go work in the field, like, hey, you get to be a family, and there's going to be classes that you can take, and some of those classes will actually help you have like you know, some kind of job market value. But on the other side, more importantly, like some of them are just because you're a human. And humans actually should be able to study philosophy, and humans should be able to study art and do art and play musical instruments. And so humanizing like institutions in border towns is a really big one. And then the other one is, I think that the humanities and the social sciences are fucked in the current neoliberalized university. And I don't think that there's any turning things backward. I think we're so far gone now. And the university is so much about the... it's about what kind of job you're going to go for, right? It's basically a diploma mill. You know, it's like the new glorified and way too expensive trade school, and I think that we should just embrace that, because that is what it is. It shouldn't cost as much if that's all that it is. And then the humanities and social sciences should be moved to libraries, and public lectures and closed seminars would just be a part of people like me, like our life. This is what we would do. We would just teach philosophy and psychology and sociology and anthropology and economics and political science and all the things that we want to study, instead of it being like in the weird neoliberal hellscape, because I don't know any professors who are happy with the situation. And that is a pretty radical rupture. It's just to say, well, why are they even there? And it's like they're all fighting to get like a little bit more in their budget, as more and more professors are phased out and replaced with people like me, adjuncts, working part-time, right? And most of these lecture scenarios are being replaced by discussion groups. So people like us who are obsessives, who really do want to see someone who spent their whole life reading and studying something actually profess and give a real lecture series on a course. We don't even get to do that at the university, because they show up to class and they're like, so tell me what you think about the reading. And it's just like, I don't fucking care. Teach, And of course I understand like that's a little heretical as well. Some people have like really, strong feelings. They like the flipped classroom. They like let's all just have conversations now. But it's like, no, man. Let's all pretend, let's take turns playing the role of the lecturer, right? And that's kind of what we're trying to defend at Theory Underground, is like, when we have a professor come and they're like, oh yeah, it'll be a discussion. We're like, can you please lecture? Like, please, can you actually profess? Because that's what we want. We're not, especially because we're trying to center the people who aren't present. Like, yeah, Nance is going to be able to be present. Well, guess what? A lot of the people are listening to it after the fact. And there was nothing worse or more annoying to me than when I was at the New Center for Research and Practice, right? And I was working, and I would listen back on lectures, and it's almost all conversation between grad students. This person studies art, and that person likes Deleuze, and they all just keep talking back and forth. And I'm like, I'm trying to learn this text. And it's not the same if you're not there for it, right? And so, I don't know. But going back to I guess I'll quilt it all by just saying that we started to refer to this as the 3 T's. Time energy is only a necessary condition. It's not a sufficient condition of the good life. And Benjamin Studebaker, who he's going to be teaching political philosophy at Theory Underground next year. Oh, you don't know about this? Rudy. So I haven't been telling people about this yet, but he's teaching a whole Cambridge course on political philosophy at Theory Underground, and he taught at Cambridge. And so he's teaching this whole Cambridge course over the course of a year. So he's going to be giving a lecture every week for a whole year at Theory Underground. And people who treat it seriously are basically going to get the equivalent of this Cambridge crash course. And when he gave a lecture 3 months ago at Theory Underground, it's just a guest lecture that he did, he was talking about ancient Chinese philosophy and Confucius and how that relates to time energy, as well as Plato and Aristotle. And so he really loves the ancients. And he called the lecture Time Energy Before Descartes, because he had seen my lecture on Heidegger and using Heidegger to make sense of all this stuff. And he's like, yeah, but what was time energy before Descartes? And this is where he rolls out the most succinct way of saying something that I've been trying to say for the last 8 years. And he says, it's the 3 T's. It's tutelage, talent, and time energy. So tutelage means like a tutor or a mentor, someone who's helping from the teaching position. Talent, obviously, it's something that we all have some kind of talents that we don't usually get a chance to discover. And then if you do discover it, then instantly people are like, wow, you should do that for the rest of your life. It's what if I have other talents and I haven't found them yet? Come on, guys. No, just do that one thing and sacrifice everything for it, or else. But the idea would be with tutelage, talent, and time energy, beautiful things can happen. And the only way for that to happen, reliably in a society, is with institutions built towards these higher human ends. And so it's the university existed to provide that once upon a time to the children of the elite. And now even the children of the elite are fucked. Now even the children of the elite are well, what are you going to do with that degree? They'll look at you. What are you going to do with that degree? And it's one of the advantages to being born into the elite at once upon a time was you could say, what? No one would ask that question, because it's absurd. You're going to do things that are good in themselves. So that's how I would answer that question about what I would do if I was a senator.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know. I wanted to add something on something that you said, but I lost my train of thought a bit. But it is the question of, if there's value, as you said, in the capitalist mode of production, if everything is the same when the dollar is put onto it, then you can think outside of it, and not only that, it colonizes everything else. And then you always have to, it's in your unconscious, you always refrain to it, I mean, think about it. I don't know, you also said, so maybe the only way to get outside of that system is to really get outside of this value form, but then only new problems arise. I don't know if I'm going to go down that train of thought. I have been thinking about this recently, and so it kind of is a all or no or nothing question. So you either have value in money form, in front of which everything is the same, or you go away with it, so you don't have it anymore. But then you still have to have socially recognized work that has value, socially recognized time, energy that has value. And I don't trust anybody to make the decision. I don't trust the government to make the decision. I would maybe trust an AI to make that decision, not as jokingly, but I don't think that we have even the slightest level of trust in our current government. And then I don't see that trust coming from a, I don't know, revolutionary government in Europe or anything. I think
It's gonna be harder to trust a government when they just killed your parents, and the communist one would kill my parents, quickly.
So
because they'd be out there with assault rifles saying, "Get off my land!" at their farm,
no,
it's a real problem.
I don't have a direct question. It's more something that I thought about. But talking about time, energy, and reforming old institutions, making new. What do you think about the place? So, you're metaphorically speaking, or not metaphorically speaking. So you are on the internet. You have a digital space and a kind of a digital community and everything, but like this library is in person. Nothing happens digitally. So in these reformed institutions, how do you, as somebody who does live events and somebody who does digital events, what's the solution, but does the space matter? And if yes, which probably it definitely does, how does it in fact interact with the new institutions? So places where time, energy should be spent. Because as you said, the desire is always the desire of the other, and here communities play a large part to it. And then maybe how are digital communities constituted and how in-person ones.
I've been experimenting with what can be done with the lecture medium, because I don't think any professor who's very self-aware about these kinds of things likes talking to their laptop and seeing everybody else's foreheads, you know what I mean? And if you talk to the right professor, they're just showing their forehead anyway the whole time, where they're in the dark, and it's an unnatural distance, right? Thinking, okay, from here I could give a lecture, right? And I could project out. Well, the problem is we're all on laptops, and so my sort of studio space at the place I'm living at with Anne right now has the Theory Underground studio is it's got a whiteboard on one wall, and then it's got a lectern in front of that whiteboard, so I can stand at this lectern. And then the camera is on, it's probably about as far away as Jenny. So the camera is about that far away. And right behind the camera, I have another screen set up, so I can actually have all the people on Zoom, their faces are right behind the camera. And so it's I'm looking at the whiteboard and I'm talking over here, but then I always look back at the classroom. The point is having that distance actually makes a huge difference. And I think should be evident even in Anne's lectures. Anne lectures differently when she's sitting in front of her laptop as opposed to when she's got the whiteboard and she's like talking in front and everyone's like that far away. So I think that there is something special about like that kind of distance, probably like deep evolutionary stuff, you know, about being around a campfire or something. I don't know. Who knows? I'm not going to do the evolutionary psychology thing, but like, you know, who knows? Probably. It'd be easy to make some story about why that is. But I think that experiments with the form like that have to be done, and that, you know, like fucking universities, like they spend like $35,000 on some new smart whiteboard, right? They're like, oh, well, we gotta be cutting edge, you know, gotta be competitive. And it's like, no one is doing anything with that. Like some salesman came to the administration, and not the faculty, and sold it to the administration. And the faculty's like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with it? Where's my chalkboard? Like, you know how many professors prefer the chalkboard over the whiteboard, and now they got the smart board and they hate it. And so, like, shorter term solution, people should pay me and Nance to come set up their tech at universities. And so we're talking about like, so we've got like these library, humanities, social science kind of institutions in towns and cities all over the U.S. and the rest of the world, hopefully. It'll trickle out to you. It will. But if we can just get it to happen there. So that you've got like, these are like in towns and cities all over the U.S., right? Well, then you've got these border towns. I would think that there's probably a way to open it up so that somebody teaching in a small town somewhere would be able to have people joining from other places all over the country and maybe the world. And that people who are in these transitional border town kind of institutions would be able to go and sit in spaces, also not just up against an actual laptop, but like the screen's over there, the camera's kind of further away as well. Like they're actually kind of situated differently, and it's a little bit more of a learning environment. Because I think that the space really does matter, and the internet just flattens those spaces, and most people can't really get much from it unless they're pretty autistic. That's true, right? Half of everyone is nodding. The other half is like, well, maybe not. But I don't know. Like,
the other half is just avoiding eye contact.
Yeah, the other half is like, that's me.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you would add anything to anything that we've said so far. Either of you, you're both very familiar with everything at Theory Underground and all of this stuff.
Yeah, no, I don't. We spend a lot of time thinking about form and presentation and the brokenness of both real life and on the internet. And there are currently no solutions, and so we're still trying to figure out how best to transmit this learning and equip people with what they need to learn. I don't know.
The big part of it is right now, I think that there are a whole variety of fields of inquiry that deserve their own departments, and that a proper university, well-rounded sort of liberal arts education today should include introductory classes in all of these different fields. And I have like a list of some of them right in front of me, but like, so CMT and CDT are two of the ones that we're doing on a monthly basis at Theory Underground. CMT is critical media theory, and CDT is critical doxology and time energy. And so that's where I'm kind of developing the time energy theory stuff, but also doing this sort of immanent critique of popular bestsellers, self-help, business success literature, that kind of thing. Because that was my point of entry into nonfiction, but it's also like most working class people's point of entry into nonfiction. And so the that as the... Oh yeah, all the water's gone. No, I think it's all... Yeah. Maybe we'll take an intermission here also in a moment. Actually, it's almost over. So.
No, just keep talking. We'll do it.
Okay. So critical media theory and my students at the actual university, the thing that gets them talking the fastest and most excitedly is always phone addiction. And I've found that Timenergy is a great way of connecting with regular working people because they get it at like a very visceral, intuitive level. And so what do they get? That they don't have it. So it's about a universal lack, right? Like it's a shared lack. And it's great to be able to connect with other people on the basis of a shared lack. But the devices that keep us looped into the internet are also something we all have in common. The difference is what we consume. The things we consume through the medium are extremely niche, weird, idiosyncratic kinds of content that all, I mean, if we were to sit here and really look at each other's scroll habits, it would be only interesting from a sort of sociological or anthropological point of view, unless like maybe there'd be an overlap with someone else in the room and you'd be like, yeah, we could scroll together. But for the most part, there's a reason people don't scroll together, right? And it's because it is so targeted. So even if like, oh, we like to, like, let's just say that we all can, like me and Rudy, we love jujitsu, videos on TikTok. If we liked that, the chances are we're not going to like a lot of the other stuff that we both like watch or whatever. So it gets really idiosyncratic. But that's the content. The form is ultimately where we all connect. Sharing the form of the medium itself and what it does to us, which is, for the most part, makes us overly neurotic and distracted, right? So that and the sort of breakdown of social etiquette that comes with it being so new and saturating everything makes critical media theory a perfect way of learning how to talk with other people from any walk of life, like almost any walk of life. The big exception, I guess, would be like Amish people, but no one talks to them anyway, so you'd have to like live close to the Amish to like. I kind of want to do a channel just for Amish people because, like, at the age of 16, they get to go on Rumspringa, and so we'd call it the real Rumspringa. Like, it's a podcast idea we keep talking about. It's like, hey, they're telling you to do meth and alcohol so you can figure out if you actually want to live in the world, but to truly do Rumspringa, you're going to have to study philosophy, You're going to have to deprogram your ideology as part of your Rumspringa, They're like, that's way more interesting than meth.
Go from there.
Yeah. So critical media theory, I think, would be an essential field. Critical doxology and Timenergy, essential field. Critique of sex and gender is this is such an interesting area, but it's so hard to talk about because you can't say the wrong thing or you're fucking done. And so, we're going to next year get into that territory a bit, and some people won't like it, and
It's a bit scary.
they'll go away. But the fact is human beings need to be able to have these kinds of conversations about this stuff. Critique of political economy, critique of libidinal economy. What's CTP? Oh, critique of therapism and psychiatry. Right, and so for critique of therapism and psychiatry, I think Lacan is probably fundamental for every one of these in some way. And it's cool that all of the great continental thinkers are going to be fundamental to CMT, CDT, CSG, CTP, CLE, CPE, and I've got a bunch of other ones too. But the point is like each one is a different approach to the question of the good life and certain unique problems that we're facing today, usually in a way that connects with people at a pretty visceral level and that people want to talk about, but they don't really know how to talk about it. And so I'm saying that like these kinds of these fields have to be established and done as actual fields, not just like, oh yeah, like here's a chapter in a book somewhere. But no, it's like, no, there should be conferences for these things. There should be actual how to teach these things in existence. And that is ultimately what I see me developing. Like what I am developing here is, and with the help of everyone who's involved, but it's like, this is my doctorate in what I think I should be doing for the next 25 years. Like that's kind of how I see Theory Underground. It's like, this is my doctorate in the things that I think I should be doing for the next 25 years. And what that is ultimately the development of fields like this for high school teachers and college teachers, and hopefully people in these new learning institutions that will exist. I think they're going to have to exist because the need is there. And the fact that we already have people coming into the stuff that we're doing, not from any kind of a background that should have made them interested in these things, tells us that there is a need. Now, if I wasn't fighting the entire attention economy and the entire structure of the internet, which was not made for these kinds of things, then who knows how many more people would be into it right now. But right now, that we are fighting, every day, just to be able to kind of do this work without getting sucked into it and turned into constantly distracted and neurotic products of the internet, which is part of why we care so much about touring and experimenting with the medium in ways that get us hybrid and with one another in what we call the meat space, like meat space. But it's a double entendre because we also are meeting each other here,
Yeah, I don't have any other questions. If you want to ask questions, discussion, something.
Yeah, I saw in Krakow, Poland, you're going to talk about the problems of the left, right? Timenergy, and can you say something more about this?
The post-left and Timenergy. This is like the Twix commercial, right? Like, I'm just thinking about what I'll say the whole time. Sorry, thank you so much. Yeah. So.
Bring up Gores and Tut.
Yeah, man. So, the post-left is an actual tendency in anarchism, and separate from that, which is mostly a thing in Europe, I think, this sort of anarchist post-left thing in Europe. There is also the post-left in the United States, which is mostly people who burnt out after Bernie, and they became some kind of dissident populist right, usually. And if they didn't become dissident populist right, then they became cozy with that. And if I was a couple years younger and a little bit more susceptible, I probably would have just gone in that direction. I probably would have just gone into like being an influencer and that kind of thing. But I think it's empty and hollow, and there's no future to it. And but I saw the temptation. I mean, it's like, well, the left's not where it's happening, and there's a lot of this sort of dissident energy, and people are interested in like working class programs, just like not international, because come on, they're just being realistic, localist, focusing on what's immediate. I can be sympathetic to it, but and like with the Red Scare podcast, for instance, I've never listened to an episode that they've done, never once, but I understand that they are kind of part of the post-left. And what people tell me, people only tell me things about podcasts. I don't ever have the time for podcasts, but I understand like there's a couple of ladies who are the hosts of that podcast. I don't know if there was more people, but I understand one of them, back when they were all just leftists, one of them was already like a pro-life leftist. And that's pretty rare in the United States for there to be a woman who's pro-life on the left. And so then, of course, the fact that they became like this sort of post-left podcast, well, that makes sense, right? Because when you don't agree with the left on every single thing in the United States, well, then if you disagree on like one thing, well, you're already you're not going to be able to really kick it with the Democratic Socialists of America, for instance.
I think it's the same in Europe.
It's the same.
Let's be real. Yeah.
Let's be real. Okay. I don't know, but yeah, the difference between Europe and the United States, I think the main difference when it comes to these things is, and there's like this weird thing, we're still trying to feel it out between ourselves, like, but left means something here that is, it has like this sort of historical legacy and lineage. And of course that's rooted in like the worker struggles and all of these things. And so and obviously like there's like this actual history of persecution, yeah. Whereas left in the United States has just always meant like liberals to progressives. Of course, if you're like a liberal to a progressive and you like got really radical for a while, then somebody like Ivar probably came along and was like, hello, comrade, you should read this, this is the real left. Like, and it's this is where the lefter than thou sort of tendency comes from. And I have a whole chapter in this book called Lefter Than Thou. And it's basically just saying like, I don't care if you call me left or not, because I feel like as soon as we're in that conversation, we're not in like the conversations I'm trying to be, which is, this has all been great. But that conversation is like, oh, well, is this really left? And oh no, and then people have an argument about what really is left. And I just don't care. Like maybe the left is a big part of the solution. Maybe the left is the entirety of the solution. Maybe the left is not a part of the solution at all. We don't know what the solution will be because we don't really understand the current situation, because we haven't mastered all of these fields, have we? So we don't even have the literacy to be able to have the conversation, to be able to figure out these things. With all that said, I see the post-left as either being like this post-Bernie thing in America or this post like anarchist thing in Europe. And I looked into some of the sources for this post-left anarchist thing in Europe, and it looks like it's nothing at all related to anything we're doing. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting, because when people call us post-left, and that we haven't called that, my position is, well, I've looked into these things a little bit. I mean, I haven't listened to maybe these podcasts or whatever, but I don't see that is like this serious research effort that doesn't think we know the solutions. And so I think that the main difference though between this anarchist post-left and kind of where we're coming at things from is that we're post-Marxist. And those people they're just like these post-anarchist people. And so for them, they say, oh, like the left is boring. Oh, go to another protest. Boring. I just want to throw bricks through windows. Like, like that's their attitude. And that's like they're post-left because it's boring. And I'm like, I don't think we've ever been boring enough. Can we be more boring, please? Like, we're trying to do a 17-hour reading over here. What are you guys talking about? And that's because we're trying to understand things at this way bigger level, because we believe in, or we have like this sort of hope in, maybe someday people being able to do like larger scale structural change that isn't just like this Lenin 2.0, but that is actually, and it's not just revolutionary, let's kill everybody's parents and burn the priest or whatever. Like, no, we're talking about like something that is like a real like thing that real.
There's BTP, and then there's like breakthrough B through W. These are all subfields that you have to combine together. These are individual research programs that deserve their own pedagogy and their own education. And you have brick through window class,
black bloc,
grease class,
set the cop car on fire, ACAP 101,
Antifa.
I mean, these are just all subfields.
Those are all the subfields of the current activist scene, right? And so
no, but I think you're actually I'm being halfway asinine, but I think that actually those are presented as complete metaphysics, which is the critique, instead of like it's only about throwing bricks through windows. It's only about some kind of symbolic tribute to as a signifier for your left credential. Mm-hmm. It's not actually about that, like, or like if you look at the right-wing version, which is like School of Americas, where Noriega studied. He's like, here's how you kill the revolutionaries. Yep. Here's how you take over the corporations. Like, there's actually a pedagogy of what you're talking about for the right that's super effective, so that Pinochet and Noriega can actually go back and do it. Yeah. And like, if you look at their pedagogy, it actually looks a lot like yours, where all of the subfields of what it means to be a right-wing reactionary technocrat is actually broken down into those verticals, exactly like you said. And the problem with the left is... but I mean...
What are you trying to say?
but I just kind of what you were saying was just kind of hitting me, and I was like, that instead of those as being a kind of a taxonomy of subfields in the way that you put them in acronyms, they're kind of treated as like metaphysically complete, immersive ways of being. To like either... And like, so you have the worst of a kind of complete metaphysics and a kind of a shopping cart, consumerist, identitarian.
Yeah. And that kind of critique right there, that is, I think, like some of the most solid sort of post-left stuff. I think you could probably be post-left and still basically left. To me, like, I feel like it's like, I am culturally Christian. Maybe I should embrace that a little bit more, actually read the Bible. This is part of, like, it has influenced me and who I am and all this stuff. What does it really mean to be culturally Christian? And then I go, fuck, man, I'm basically culturally left still, even though I'm, like, in this position that, so it's like being anti-stuff is not a real solution, but also if you're not anti-stuff, then people think you're just going to synthesize things. So this is why people would call me a red-brown. Oh, you're doing Marx and Heidegger. That's like a Nazi and a communist. So like red and brown. It's like, that's what you want, right? Red, brown. And it's like, no, dude. Like, I read them against each other. Like, I'm looking for the most radical positions outside of my world to inform my world. Like, they're about as far outside of my world as I can get. Someone like Haas, I think, does just read them like synthetically. I'm reading them contradictorily, right? And so I want to end this actually really quick, and I people can still ask questions and stuff, but I realized that I opened it by saying the word signifier, and you just reminded me. What's your name again?
Jeremiah.
Jeremiah, that's right. So, but you used the word signifier, and I was like, that's right, because I opened it by saying that I would say something about the signifier itself, Theory Underground. So my name, when I was just like a sort of Marx-based leftist fusionist Bernie activist guy, was theory plebe. And plebe, P-L-E-E-B, is a misspelling of pleb, and it's a joke on me because I actually thought that that's how it was said for a while. So it's a joke, American idiots. But like, the point is that I was already underground and trying to figure out what to do with it. But then when I realized, oh, this is the underground, like, do something with that. And Mikey and I were having these conversations, and he was like, yeah, man, this is an underground scene. Just like there's been so many movements in the underground. We've got so many really interesting people like coming into their own intellectual and artistic projects from this scene. The question is like, what can be done with it? And so by putting a name on it, which is to say it is the underground theory scene, made me go, oh, so theory plebe goes underground, becomes theory underground, an institution to help the underground theory scene become something more than just a scene, but to become a real intellectual milieu. And then there's a double entendre there. We were using it as a triple entendre because I was also using the logo of the London Underground.
Until he got sued.
Well, they threatened to sue me. It was the London Underground until they threatened to sue me with like 9 letters. And at some point I was like, fine, we have a new logo now, guys, leave me alone. Yeah. But we were using that because like these are all trains of thought. Like all the CMT, CDT, CSG, CTP, CLE, all aboard, choo-choo. Like that kind of metaphor was fun to play with, but also ultimately, and this is the most important signification to underground for us, is like hardcore and just music and like what were punks doing at the time that American hardcore comes into being, right? Because it doesn't come from America, but there's something special about the American hardcore scene. And that was, I mean, there's so many things special about it. I want Nance to say something about that. But for me, I'm not a punk, and I never was a punk. But I had some of that spirit in me because that music influenced a lot of the other kinds of underground music that came later. And so the kinds of stuff that I was listening to, which was kind of like where metal and hardcore kind of met, the ethos of you can do it too, and anyone can do this, and do it yourself, and tour, and go out and actually meet people, and don't try to make it big by going to all the big label people and saying, please listen to my music. Just go meet people and take it to them. That ethic is where we get the tour thing from. That's where we get a lot of like the significance in the word underground. Well, I don't know what you want to add about the underground.
No, yeah, I will fight anybody who says American hardcore isn't the best hardcore. I do think there's something special about the moment with...
Nobody looks like they want to...
Yeah, no one wants to fight, so I'm like, But yeah, it was the kind of do-it-yourself. It was... they were young kids who had an awareness of they had impossible demands and they kind of set out to culminate them on their own. And I think that's what this is. I think this is refusing to settle for the academy, or refusing to settle for being just an idiot worker, or all the other categories we find ourselves in. Yeah.
I think that's the best ending we could get. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
We'll all go to dinner soon, yeah? Everyone's welcome to come with us. I'm going to run to the restroom really quick, and then I'm going to go outside if someone would like to bum me.
Yeah. We're going to go fight now.
About an American hardcore.
Theory Underground, American Idiots European Tour 2024, coming to a city near you if you're in Europe. Our book tour is taking us all over Europe during the month of May. Theory Underground's American Idiots Tour is about anti-intellectualism in the United States. The US is the world leader in anti-intellectualism and is exporting it to the world via the crises of distraction and exhaustion, two symptoms of this new phase of capital expansion and belligerent state decrepitude. Hear from the Theory Underground crew about the existential and structural possibilities for cultivating intellectual and creative culture for regular working people and university graduates alike. Theory Underground is a teaching, research, and publishing platform by and for workers, autodidacts, and academics who want to do more than they are able to within the confines of academia.
This tour is promoting 2 new publications from our underground press. David McKerracher's Timenergy, Why You Have No Time or Energy, is about how our job-centric society interferes with self-actualization and meaningful relationships. Starting with the fact that we are all exhausted all of the time, McKerracher builds out a critique between Heidegger and Marx, going on to the schooling system itself and the possibilities for a new approach to technological automation and post-careerist education. Underground Theory, coming to a city near you, includes 31 authors, including big names like Slavoj Žižek and unknown warehouse workers in the US who are students of past courses at Theory Underground. Its main 4 themes are education, politics, theory, and history, with a big emphasis on critical media theory, how our technological artifacts determine our social existence, and the failures of the neoliberal university. And others, such as Timenergy theory, the PMC, and post-left political critique, to name a few.
Tour dates: April, Paris and Brussels. By the time you're listening to this, it's too late, but we would have loved to see you here. Berlin, May 10th, 7 p.m., the Psychoanalytic Library, Timenergy and Psychoanalysis. In Austria, Linz, May 13th at 7 p.m., Timenergy and the Good Life. In Vienna, May 14th, 7 p.m., Timenergy and Anti-Intellectualism. Krakow, May 18th, 5 p.m., Post-leftism and Timenergy. Glasgow, May 22nd, 7 p.m., Timenergy and the Darkest Timeline. London, May 24th, 7 p.m., Anti-Intellectualism, Its Causes. Oxford, May 25th, 2 to 7 p.m., The Consciousness of Timenergy. The links are in the description. All right, everybody. Looking forward to seeing you on tour. Peace.
Peace. Wu-Tang.